So welcome to another episode of Perspectives, hosted by Ekansh. We have a very special guest here with us today, Mr. Mark Cuban. As most of you are aware, Mr. Cuban is one of the most successful entrepreneurs, businessmen, and investors in the world. So I'm very excited to have him join me and share his thoughts and perspective on topics ranging from COVID-19 to social justice to business. And so without further ado, let's get right into it. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me, Mr. Cuban.
My pleasure, Kosh. Thanks for having me. Call me Mark. I don't like being
All
called
right.
Mr.
All right. So every sector of society is reeling due to COVID-19's impact. The pandemic has had severe economic consequences across the globe. So
Yep.
based on what you've seen, how specifically have small and large businesses been affected by COVID-19, especially in ways normally unseen by consumers?
I think the biggest impact has been the transition to digital. I mean,
Hmm.
there's been an accelerated transition. I mean, I think we knew inherently, based off historical trends, that more and more people were becoming comfortable buying online, but not being able to leave your house really forced a lot of people to start buying online even if they hadn't before, and buying products that they otherwise would not have purchased online. Things like groceries in particular. Now I get a grocery delivery from Whole Foods. Seems like every second or third day, and that wasn't normal activity for me before.
Right.
So I think that's the biggest transition, and that really impacted companies that did a lot of face-to-face business, events companies, the Mavs. We couldn't have people in an arena, movie theaters, hotels. Those are companies that have been significantly impacted.
So a lot of companies have switched over this kind of online model to adapt to the abnormal circumstances we have now. So do you see that pattern continuing forward even when a vaccine for COVID-19 is developed and the
Yeah,
crisis
because
kind
it's
of passes?
convenient. I mean, sometimes you don't realize how convenient something is until you try it. And
Hmm.
there's this process called creative destruction, where we look at new ways of doing things. It's been tougher for restaurants, but it's not like people aren't eating. They're finding different
Yeah.
ways to entertain themselves while they eat. And so you've seen businesses build up that deliver food, that are meal programs. You see people who aren't willing to go to a gym anymore, buy a Peloton or other work at home equipment. And so that's changed a lot of behaviors
Hmm.
that, maybe for the better. And so there's going to be a lot of things that we don't go back to doing that we used to do.
Right, right. So then how have you specifically with your companies tackled this challenge or in some ways for a lot of companies it's been an advantage doing business online.
Yeah, I mean, look, we try to get people, our companies, as much online as possible,
Hmm.
and not just online, but really talk to their consumers and ask them how they want to consume online. Doing a lot more Zoom interactions so that rather than it being impersonal, we can have an interaction like
Hmm.
this, and that allow people to feel very comfortable now. Early on in the pandemic, it was a little bit weird. Now
Right.
it's
Yeah, yeah,
almost
yeah.
more weird to talk on the phone than it is to be a Zoom. Like you've got your headset, I've got my setup. It's not people holding the phone anymore like it was at the beginning. Excuse me. So I think a lot of people have adapted and become even more comfortable because you don't have to leave the house. You can have shorts
Right.
on, right?
Yep.
And you can eat, you have sitting a snack right there to eat the minute you're done, and so there's, as much as you might miss the people you work with, or going to school isn't normal like it used to be, there
Hmm.
are some advantages. And I think we try to get our companies to leverage those advantages.
Absolutely. Yeah. So then, like I mentioned earlier, it's had severe economic impacts, especially for small businesses adversely. So there's been a lot of attempts at governmental relief for these small businesses and businesses that have been businesses that have been experiencing especially been experiencing hardship. So right now the House, the Senate, and the administration are at odds again over the latest stimulus package. So in your opinion, I mean, what do you think the government as a whole can do better at this point?
We're primarily a consumer driven, consumer demand driven economy. Two-thirds of the
Right.
GDP is from consumer demand. And so, in my opinion, we have to do it from the bottom up rather than the top down. Historically, you've had Republicans try to make it trickle down, where if you made it easier for businesses to have access to capital, they'll invest and that'll create jobs. I don't think
Right.
that works here. The Democrats tried their own version to trickle down, where they take tax dollars and create more programs that
Hmm.
people apply for, and they hope that that creates trickle down to the people doing the jobs. What worked initially for us is the direct stimulus where people got $1,200 checks. That, the people got to spend it on the things they truly needed to spend it on. If they didn't have an immediate need, they were able to save it. And we actually saw income go up during that period of time. That along with the enhanced unemployment benefits.
Hmm.
And to me, that direct stimulus is the best way to do it because it allows people to take care of their immediate needs immediately, right? If,
Hmm.
if you need to pay your rent, if you need to put food on the table, that stimulus program allows you to do it. If it's top down, whether it's Democratic approach or Republican approach, it takes a while to get to the people that actually need it, and it still may not get to them. And so I don't think that's nearly as effective. So I think
Right.
we need to put politics aside and get these new stimulus bills passed right now.
Absolutely, absolutely. So the COVID-19 crisis, it's not just going to go away unless we get a vaccine developed and distributed, right? So then what do you foresee as the course, what do you foresee as the course that the development of this vaccine is going to take in the coming months?
So a couple things there. One, we were through this again somewhat similarly 100 years ago, you
Right,
know,
yeah.
and we got through that. It wasn't like 3 years ago we were talking about just getting out of this 97-year,
Hmm.
virus problem. And so we know even though it was horrific what the country went through and the world went through, there is a way to get to the other side, even before all the technology and science we have today. So I'm confident we'll get there. Now we get to the point of, okay, how do we do a vaccine? And traditionally in creating vaccines for the flu or SARS or other things, it was done by one company with some support from the government. But
Hmm.
now you have not just the government, but you have all these big pharma companies and scientists from around the world working together to come up with a vaccine, and lots of money being pushed towards it. So we're now already hearing about vaccines that are in level 3 trials that have been
Hmm.
manufactured, that are being shipped to different hospitals and doctors to be implemented once the final approval is in place. So I'm actually optimistic and have even told some of the people I know that are involved that I'm more than willing to publicly take a vaccine once those people start taking it. Because if
Right,
they're
right.
willing to put it on themselves,
Yeah.
I'm going to be confident enough to do it. And they're very confident as well. So I'm actually looking forward to it. Now,
Hmm. That's
even
good.
once
Good to
we,
hear.
yeah, but even once we get the vaccine, getting people to have confidence to take it is going to be a whole nother thing because people don't even take the
Right.
flu vaccine, and
Hmm.
so that's going to be a challenge. But, as long as everybody at St. Mark's and my kids and me have taken it, we'll be okay.
I agree. I agree. So, there's a lot with COVID-19, what's happening right now. There's a lot to bring us down, but what gives you the most hope?
I think where there's change, there's opportunity. There's going to be kids like yourself that have unique ideas and visions for what happens post COVID. The way things can be done that are better, that are different than the way they've always been done. I mentioned creative destruction, where one thing, is disrupted, another opportunity can be created. And I really think that, in a few years, whether it's 5, 10, I don't know, 15, we're going to look back and realize there were a lot of world-class companies that were created that changed the world because of COVID, because people had ideas that, might not, they may have thought might not have worked pre-COVID,
Mhm.
but now we're in a position to do post-COVID. And I'm really confident that that's going to happen.
I feel like we've so far put ourselves in a position to move forward and make that progress and build those companies and move forward,
Yep.
by kind of creating a sense of shared community and shared humanity because the virus affects, at the end of the day, affects
Everybody.
everybody the same. So
Yeah,
that's a big
no
part of it
question.
too, I think.
Yeah, and you hope there's more of that, right?
Of
Because,
course, yeah.
and that's the cool thing about Gen Z. You guys are right on top of the, being on top of social justice, being on top of having shared concerns for humanity and the climate, and recognizing that, this is going to be your world, or it is your world, and you want it to be a good place for everybody to live in. And that's, I'm proud of your generation for doing that. It gives me
Yeah.
hope that, we'll get rid of the idiots that are in politics right now and have people who care.
So speaking of hope, I want to take a second and talk about the Black Lives Matter movement. So in today's especially charged political environment, how do you characterize the importance of these open and courageous conversations around systemic racism?
Do you guys still say the Pledge of Allegiance?
At St. Mark's we don't, but in public school, I remember when I went to public school, I remember
Okay.
saying it every morning when I got to
And
school.
you remember the end of it with liberty and justice for all,
Yes, sir.
right? That's an American ideal, justice for all. And to me, that's what Black Lives Matters is about. It's about bringing fairness and to our country and ending racism so that every individual in this country does have justice and
Hmm.
does have liberty, and it truly is for all. And to me, that's what the Black Lives Matters movement is about. Um, it's not political. It's about ending racism.
Absolutely not. Yeah. So then how do you see us getting to that point? Because it's a long road ahead.
Oh
And
yeah.
it's I mean, it's just started. It's a long road ahead. So then, I mean, how do you see this progressing? How do we actually implement change?
Conversations, like you said, courageous conversations, talking to your white friends,
Hmm.
right? Because you have to deal with racism every day, right? You've seen it, you've heard it, you've felt it. Um, and white people don't.
Right.
And you've probably had conversations with your family about race. You've had discussions on how to deal with race and when people are prejudiced against you or racist against you. White people don't have those conversations. You know,
Absolutely. And I mean, on that note, there was do you know Emmanuel Acho, his YouTube podcast,
mhm,
Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man. So
yeah.
I've watched through that, and I mean, that is amazing. I think it stood out to me. It stood out to me so much, and it's so important and necessary, I feel like, for not just white people, but for everybody to hear. Because like he says, the only way we can make progress is if people actually know why we need to make progress
Right.
and know what we have to change. Because I mean, people go on Instagram and we post this picture of a black screen, right? On a Tuesday a couple weeks ago, we post this picture of black screen. Nobody actually knows what we're trying to change. Nobody actually knows how to get there. And I feel like that one podcast, if you're
Well,
watching,
but
please
that's
go
part of
check
the
it out.
problem.
That's huge.
Yeah, well, that leads to part of the issue. One of the challenges for the movement is there's no real leadership.
Hmm.
When you think of Black Lives Matters, who do you think of as the leader?
No one. It's hard to come up with like one figure. Yeah.
Or one or two or three or four, or anybody, right?
Yeah.
Or who is it that you think speaks for you as a person of color when it comes to this movement?
It's hard. Yeah. It's
That's
hard
the
to think of
challenge.
someone. Yeah.
Right. That's the challenge right now because what happens is when you don't have somebody in a position of leadership speaking for a movement, then other people get to control the narrative. And that
Hmm.
becomes very stressful and frustrating for people trying to create change. And I've had the same conversation with a lot of people of color, and the response is the same no matter how old they are, because it's a challenge. There's when you don't have leadership, it's very, very difficult because it's hard to have people work together,
Hmm.
and when you talk about what does it truly mean and how are we going to get there, well, it's hard, there's no real plan, right? And so there's no real, um, way to know whether or not you're making progress. And so that's the challenge.
Hmm.
And so that's why I'm excited for your generation, because as you understand this is your chance to stand up. The podcast is great, but getting people together and say, this is our voice, for those who are old enough to vote, not just voting, but really standing up with your voice and saying, this is what Black Lives Matters to me. This is how we want to end racism in Gen Z, because you'll have that communal approach, but we need to find a way to get somebody or those people, find the people to be out front so that, whether they're listening, it could be you, it could be whoever, but there's got to be somebody that's saying, okay, let me bring these people together and have those conversations with the people who are part of the problem, right? Because like I said, it's not people of color discriminating against other people of color. That's the issue, right? It's white people discriminating against people of color, or people LGBTQ community. And so there's not really people to have that conversation with
Right.
people that look like me. And that's part of the challenge.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, like we talked about a couple minutes ago, this shouldn't be a political issue.
Right.
This shouldn't be a political issue, but yet somehow we still find ourselves divided. We still find ourselves divided more than ever. So then, how do we heal that divide? Whether it's with COVID, or social justice or the Black Lives Matter movement, how do we still heal that divide? And
Leadership,
you know,
right? We don't have the leadership right now in the White House. And so when the leadership is divisive, then people are going to take sides. When people don't want to hear from people of color, they divert it and say, well, sports are being political, right? It's
Hmm.
not sports being political. It's you finding a way to try to drown people out because you don't want to hear what they have to say. And so, again, we need to get people to get out there and vote. We need to get people to understand how politics matters. There's a great book that I'm reading right now, and I don't have a copy of it here. It's called The Business of or The Politics Business.
The
And it's
pol-
from a guy named Michael Porter, not Michael Porter Jr. Something. Oh my God, I'm getting the basketball player mixed up with the professor. But it's the but his last name's Porter. I forget his
Okay.
first name.
All right.
I think it's Michael Porter, but I'm not sure. That's crazy because I didn't even put the two to two together if they had the same name. But the business of politics or the politics business, one or the other. And it really talks about how politics has changed and why it's become partisan, and it puts it in a business context. Because historically, when I say that, prior to the 1970s and 80s and into the 90s, the voter was the customer, and politicians tried to make the voters happy.
Hmm.
But the incumbent parties, the Democratic and Republican parties, both have done everything to act in an antitrust manner so that outside politicians who want to run for office that are independent or smaller parties, they're doing everything to preclude them and exclude them.
Hmm.
And so it's a great book to get a good understanding of how your generation can really have an impact and change politics.
The business of politics, you said?
The Business of Politics.
Okay, I have to check that out then. That sounds
Yeah, you'll like it.
fascinating.
It's
Yeah.
actually an easy read. It's only like 230
Hmm.
pages, but it talks about, how primaries have changed the game, how ranked choice voting should be a good opportunity,
Hmm.
and about how committees, and here was the most interesting thing to me, how the Congress has changed from using committees that actually looked at legislation to creating these subcommittees and alternative committees that prevented people from looking at potential legislation.
Hmm.
And as a result, rather than somebody like Ekansh being able to come up with an idea, go to their senator and say, can we get this on the floor to be evaluated? It has to go through 15 different channels,
Right. Yeah.
and we'll never make it there. And that's by design, because then the only customer for politicians are the voters for primaries and the people who give money,
Hmm.
which makes things more partisan because the people who vote in primaries usually are the greatest extremes.
Hmm.
They have the most extremist views. And so if the only way you can be a participant in that general election in November is to pander to those extremist views, that's the position you're going to take, and that's going to make us more partisan. So it's a really cool
Yeah.
book. So if you guys were to get Gen Z, how old are you now, Kanch?
I'm 16 now.
Okay, so you got a couple years, but in
Yeah.
those 2 years, I mean, to build up a block of primary voters,
Hmm.
that would change the game.
Absolutely. So I'm gonna be completely honest. I read your biography a couple of days ago, and
Uh-huh.
honestly, I was so impressed. So it was amazing. It was amazing to read about your life and how you actually grew up selling door to door to buy a pair of new shoes. There's that
Yep.
story, of course.
Yep.
So what would be your advice to aspiring entrepreneurs and especially to the younger generation as a whole?
So if I was 16, 14, whatever, I'd be programming my Alexa and Google Homes for every home in the neighborhood, right? I'd be like, Akash, do you have an Alexa at home?
We do actually. Yeah.
Have you written any custom scripts for it?
I have not.
Has anybody even asked you about, do you even know you can do custom scripts?
I was not aware of that.
That would be my business, because then I can walk into your house and say, hey, for 50 bucks an hour or 25, whatever I can get you or your parents to pay me, I'm gonna customize Alexa so it is doing 1,000 times more for you. And I'd go to businesses and do the same thing. I'd go to car dealerships because now they're putting Alexa in cars. And that would be a business that I could start tomorrow, because let me just tell you, it's easier to do Alexa scripts than it is to do web pages.
Okay. Okay. So it's just like coming up with a new topical idea that like
Yeah,
you could implement now. Yeah.
yeah. Why not, right? There's thousands of
Right.
those things, right?
Uh-huh.
Thousands of simple things that you can control your own destiny with and do yourself. But you just got to go out there and look.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So, um, how do you in your life balance instinct and spontaneity with careful logic and thoughtful reasoning, both with work and business and outside work and just in your
I'm not
regular
real
life?
good at that. So I try to partner with people. So I'm a ready, fire, aim guy, like go, 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 go,
Yeah, yeah,
full
yeah.
spontaneity. But I try to partner with people who have a completely different skill set and can help me and or hire in this particular case.
Mm-hmm.
And so between just recognizing what I'm good at and what I'm not good at really allows me to deal and create balance and figure things out correctly.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. Well, clearly it's worked.
Yeah, right. It's not bad.
Yeah, yeah. So over the years, we know you've engaged in countless, philanthropical uh, efforts, both personally and especially through the Dallas Mavericks organization. So, which one of these community service efforts is closest to your heart, means the most to you?
There's things that I do that you're not aware of, and I think those are the most important. I help a lot of people pay their medical bills,
Hmm.
and to me, that is that's that's the thing I enjoy the most and appreciate the most because a lot of cases, if those bills don't get paid, they're not going to live.
Hmm.
And so just when there's people that I can support that you know keeps them alive,
Hmm.
that's what's most rewarding.
The best kind of service. Yeah, that's amazing. It's amazing. And but not least, to end on the last note of all, what are we thinking about a Cuban 2024 presidential
It's not going to
campaign?
happen, Ekansh. It's not going to happen. It's not.
Oh, okay,
It's
okay.
not fair to
I
my
tried. I
kids.
tried.
Yeah, you tried. Yeah, my family doesn't like the idea. They're just not about it at all.
All right, all right. So thank you so much for joining me today, Mr. Cuban, and sharing, all of your insights and perspective on these topics. I really appreciate it, and I know that everyone watching appreciates the time you've given me today.
Great questions,
So
Ekansh. You're very well prepared. So thanks for having me on.
thank you, thank you. I really appreciate it. And as we go through these tough times, like we talked about before, I really hope we can come together as a nation, help each other out, as much as we can to help each other heal. Whether it's with COVID, whether it's with ending systemic racism, kind of moving towards a more bipartisan nation. Um, however we can heal. So
And
lastly,
let me
yeah,
just
yeah.
tell you, let me just add one more thing. A lot of kids think, oh, I'm 16, adults aren't going to listen to me, and it's the exact opposite. Especially in a social media world like we're in right now,
Hmm.
where it's more native to you. Now's the time to speak up. Now's the time to get involved. Now's the time to have an impact because you know how to reach all your friends. And you know how to get people, all on the same side and do the right thing. And so
Hmm.
you have a lot more power than you imagine.
I feel like we've already started that with our generation. What we're seeing, especially like you said on social media, we've already laid that foundation for like the generations to come to do the
Yep.
same thing. But we've already started to change the world, and you can see that all over the world, and it's amazing. It's amazing.
Yep. So keep on going. Don't stop now.
Oh, we plan to. We plan to keep going. So, lastly, I want to close with one of your quotes that really struck me and has stayed with me for a while. So you said when 2020 is reviewed in the history classes, no one is going to discuss the cable news shows or tweets. Students will learn who among us stood up for what is just, right, and fair. And on that note, do you have any final thoughts before we conclude?
No, man. Like I was just saying, this is your world now, Akash. This is your generation's world, and it's up to you to figure out what to do with it. It's
Mhm.
not my generation's. It's not, it's really yours, and it's a unique opportunity and a unique time. And just don't let anybody stop you.
Of course, of course. Again, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. This really means a lot to me, and I know it means so much to everybody who looks up to you and especially respects your words who's
Well, I
watching this.
appreciate
So
it.
again, thank you, and I hope we see each other again
I
sometime in
hope
the
so. You
future.
know where to find me, and I'll be up at St. Mark's with Jake.
All right, all right. Thank you so
See you
much,
guys.
and have a
Take care,
great
man.
day. Bye
You
bye.
too. Bye bye.